Lufthansa owns the last significant passenger fleet of the biggest, most iconic jumbo jet ever built, and Boeing shut down the 747 production line for good back in 2023. Every single 747-8 flying for Lufthansa right now is a plane that can never be swapped out for a new one, because brand new ones simply don't exist. And the second-hand 747-8 passenger market, there basically isn't one. So, Lufthansa is sitting on a fleet worth billions of dollars, with no production line, no fresh spare parts stream, and no simple exit plan. This is the story of how the world's last major 747 passenger operator backed itself into a corner, and why the bill for flying its way out could run past $12 billion. Let's rewind to the early 2010s. Boeing had just rolled out the newest, longest version of its most famous aircraft. A four-engine giant stretched further than any 747 before it, with room for over 360 passengers in a typical layout. And while most airlines had already moved on from the 747 as a passenger jet, Lufthansa looked at it and said, "This is still our flagship." By the time deliveries wrapped up, Lufthansa had taken 19 of them, becoming the largest passenger operator of the type left in the world. The first one touched down in Frankfurt in 2012. The very last 747-8 ever assembled rolled off Boeing's Everett production line in early 2023, and it was a freighter, not a passenger jet, delivered to Atlas Air. The passenger version had already stopped being built years earlier. Out of every 747-8 airframe Boeing ever made, only a handful of airlines ever flew the passenger version at all, and today, Lufthansa is essentially the last one standing at any real scale. Nobody else is even close. So why did Lufthansa go all in on a plane that almost every other airline had already walked away from? Well, Frankfurt. Mostly. As one of Europe's busiest long-haul hubs, Lufthansa needed serious capacity on its highest demand routes, and the 747-8 gave it a four-class flagship experience with first-class suites, upstairs premium cabins, and a level of prestige no twin-engine jet could quite match. Pack over 360 people onto one airplane, connect them through Frankfurt, then send them everywhere. On paper, it kept working for exactly the routes it was built for. And Lufthansa didn't just buy these jets to move passengers, it built brand identity around them. The upper deck became a signature of the airline's premium experience. The nose-up silhouette became instantly recognizable. And for over a decade, simply mentioning you were flying the Lufthansa 747 said something about the kind of trip you were taking. While Lufthansa kept flying its jumbos proudly, almost everyone else who'd operated the type had already moved on. And the reason boils down to one brutal figure: fuel. Research comparing operating costs has found the 747-8 burned significantly more fuel per hour than modern twin-engine widebodies, with total operating costs running well above what an equivalent Airbus A350 costs to fly on the same route. Separate estimates on the incoming Boeing 777X put its fuel burn per seat at roughly 20 to 25% lower than the 747-8, thanks to newer GE9X engines and a more efficient wing. 4 engines and a distinctive hump certainly look impressive on the tarmac. But 4 engines also means significantly more engine maintenance and a much bigger fuel bill on every single flight. Passenger habits shifted, too. Airlines increasingly leaned on efficient twin-engine jets to fly point-to-point instead of routing everyone through a small number of giant hub aircraft, because that's what modern route economics actually reward. Boeing saw where this was heading years before Lufthansa did. After passenger orders for the 747-8 dried up almost completely, with the last passenger delivery going out back in 2017, Boeing kept the line alive on freighter orders alone for years longer, before finally closing it for good in January 2023. So here's where that $12 billion alien figure comes from. Nobody at Lufthansa has stamped that exact number on an official press release, but stack up the pieces, and it's not hard to see how analysts land somewhere in that range. Let's start with the cabin program. Lufthansa is mid-rollout on its new Allegris cabin product across its long-haul fleet, and because the 777X, the jet actually designed around Allegris specifications, keeps slipping its delivery date. Lufthansa has had to force that same premium cabin overhaul onto its aging 747-8s instead, at real engineering and retrofit cost that wasn't originally budgeted for those airframes. Then there's the fuel premium. Multiply that roughly 20 to 25% efficiency gap against a 777X across 17 aircraft, by however many years Lufthansa keeps them flying, and you're already talking hundreds of millions more in extra fuel spend compared to running an equivalent twin-engine fleet doing the same job. Then we add maintenance. The oldest Lufthansa 747-8s entered service back in 2012, and Lufthansa has said it plans to keep flying the type well into the 2030s. That means certain airframes could still be in the sky at nearly 20 years old, running 4 engines that all need heavy checks on a schedule twin-engine jets simply don't require. Finally, there's resale value, or rather, the near total absence of one. Almost nobody is buying second-hand passenger 747-8s. The type demands specialized pilot training, dedicated gates, and parts that get scarcer every year now that passenger production ended nearly a decade ago. Lufthansa did just sell 2 of its own 747-8s in 2026, but reportedly not to another airline. Reports link the deal to the delayed U.S. Air Force One replacement program, which says everything about how thin the commercial resale market for this jet actually is. Unlike a 787 or an A350, Lufthansa can't simply sell off the jets it no longer wants to another passenger carrier. It either keeps flying them, or it hands them off to a buyer that isn't even in the airline business. So the part that turns this from an accounting footnote into an actual problem is that Lufthansa can't just trade these jets in for something newer, because nothing built at that seat count and prestige level is rolling off any production line today. The plane that's meant to eventually take over is the Boeing 777X, specifically the 777-9. The catch is that the 777X has become one of the most delayed aircraft programs in modern aviation history, with entry into service pushed back years past its original target, and Lufthansa itself was supposed to be the launch customer. As things stand, Lufthansa has had to keep refurbishing 747-8s specifically because the jet meant to replace them keeps sliding further into the future. And going back to Boeing for more 747-8s obviously isn't on the table at all. The tooling's gone, the supply network moved to other programs years ago, and Boeing has shown zero interest in restarting a passenger program that stopped taking passenger orders back in 2017. While Lufthansa kept its jumbos as a flagship, almost every other airline treated the 747-8 passenger jet as a dead end. As of today, Lufthansa remains one of only a handful of airlines still flying the 747-8 in passenger service at any real scale, and after selling 2 airframes in 2026, its fleet sits at 17 aircraft, expected to shrink further toward the end of the decade. Compare that to the field. Korean Air and Air China each still operate small numbers of 747-8s, but neither has built its long-haul identity around the type the way Lufthansa has. That makes Lufthansa the industry's clearest test case for the jumbo jet's final chapter. If the math on flying a 4-engine flagship into the 2030s works out, Lufthansa is the one who proves it. If it doesn't, Lufthansa absorbs the cost, because at this point, almost nobody else has enough 747-8s left to share the burden. But here's the twist that keeps this from being a straightforward decline story. Lufthansa's long-haul premium cabins, first-class suites and all, remain some of the highest-yielding seats in its entire network, and the 747-8's upper deck is a meaningful part of that. On its busiest Frankfurt routes to North America and Asia, a full 747-8 in a premium-heavy configuration still pulls in serious revenue precisely because of the cabin experience Lufthansa has spent years refining, first with dedicated first-class suites, and now with the Allegris rollout. Lufthansa hasn't quietly been retiring these jets either. It committed to a full interior refresh specifically to extend their service life, and has said publicly it intends to keep the type flying well into the next decade even as the 747-400 and older quad jets get phased out by 2028. Meanwhile, Lufthansa isn't ignoring the future. It holds a large firm order for the Boeing 777X and continues taking fresh Airbus A350 deliveries every year, building the twin-engine capacity that will eventually take over. My personal take from the industry is that this isn't a carrier stuck in denial. It's a carrier running a deliberate holding pattern. Retiring your highest-yield long-haul cabins before their replacement actually exists is how you lose premium market share, not how you save money. The real tell is the timing of that Allegris rollout onto the 747-8 specifically. That isn't the behavior of an airline planning to walk away from the type anytime soon. So, let's run this down then. Lufthansa bet bigger on the 747-8 as a passenger flagship than almost any airline left in the world, taking 19 of the last ones ever built for that role. Then the market flipped. twin-engine jets proved themselves far more efficient, and Boeing quietly wound the 747 passenger program down years before finally shutting the whole production line in 2023. That left Lufthansa holding a fleet of aging jumbos with no true passenger replacement in sight, since the 777X, the closest thing to one, keeps slipping its delivery date, and Lufthansa itself was meant to be the launch customer. Add up the retrofit costs, the fuel penalty, the rising maintenance bill on an aging four-engine fleet, and a resale market that barely exists outside of odd government buyers, and you can see the long-term cost of holding on to these jets does climb toward that multi-billion-dollar figure analysts keep circling. And yet, Lufthansa's premium cabins remain some of its most profitable seats in the sky, and the airline insists it's keeping the 747-8 flying well into the 2030s. So, is this a genius long-game play to protect the airline's most valuable cabins? Or is it the most expensive holding pattern in aviation? Well, I guess we're not really going to know the answer to that until the 777X finally shows up, whenever that turns out to be. So, what do you think? Is this a smart flagship strategy by Lufthansa? Or is it simply a very expensive game of chicken with Boeing's delivery schedule? Drop me your take in the comments below, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping the skies. See you next time.